Welcome everyone to another Observability Clinic. Today's topic is the Observability Guide to Platform Engineering Part 2. For those of you that are with me live today, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom to ask questions. For those of you that watch this either on YouTube, in the Dynatrace University, or any other place, then I'm sure you can either leave a comment on the video somewhere or just get a hold of me. Now, what have we prepared for you today, or what have I prepared for you? Let me just quickly show you. Part 2, I want to do a quick recap on part 1 because I did part 1 end of last year. Just for those of you that were not there, very quick recap. Then we just had Perform, our Dynatrace conference, a couple of weeks ago, and there were a lot of sessions around platform engineering. So I want to fill you in what I've learned and what we have learned at Perform, so that I want to make sure that you also you're aware of what happened there. And then, and this is the most exciting piece, I will use a new GitHub Codespace tutorial, or a GitHub tutorial, and I'm using GitHub Codespaces to run it. Everyone can follow the same thing that I do today because everything I'm showing you today is all public. We are going to use or create a platform that contains Backstage, GitHub, Argo, Open Feature, Captain, all these tools that you see here. And I'm using GitHub Codespaces, but you can also use any type of Kubernetes cluster, or there's other tools out there that can do similar things than Codespaces does. So this is what I have prepared for you. As I said, for those of you that are live, please ask questions through the Q&A feature in Zoom. For those of you that are watching this, I'm sure you'll find a way to ask questions. Now, the first thing I want to do before I do the recap, I want to make sure that my demo, because it will take a while to launch the whole thing, and I will run through this. Now, the first thing I want to highlight here is the link on the top, and I want to send the link on the top to everyone that is currently live in the chat. So folks, you can either scan this, the QR code, you can type in that URL, it's the same thing. It will get you to that Git repository that I will also be using. Now, here is what's going to happen as I'm preparing and launching the demo. I will go to the Git repository. I have already created tokens because what the tutorial will do, it will launch a Kubernetes cluster, will install everything, and it will install the Dynatrace operator, and it will connect to Dynatrace. And for that, we need some tokens. So I've already created the tokens, but how to create the tokens is all explained in the README. I will then fork the repo. So the way this will work, if you want to run the same tutorial, you just fork the repo on GitHub. The only thing you really need is a GitHub account. Forking means you basically get your own copy of that repo, and then you can just launch the Codespace. Launching Codespaces actually means it's a feature of GitHub, and they give you, I think, 120 hours free every month of Codespaces. It basically launches a virtual machine, and in my case, I decided in that virtual machine to install Kind, that is Kubernetes on Docker or in Docker, and in that Kubernetes cluster, we then have everything set up so that we install Argo, and Argo is then rolling out a platform that we build, and obviously everything is observed with OpenTelemetry, with Dynatrace, and a lot of other tools are in there. The reason why we built this platform is because we want to show you an end-to-end use case of a developer self-service, of how developers can onboard an app without having to think about how to get observability or security checks or any validation checks. Everything is built in and baked in. So let me double check. Here we go. There was one too far. So let me go over to my browser. And again, this is a live demo, so keep the fingers crossed that everything works fine. This is the Git repository that I sent you earlier. The link is in the chat, and I'm just sending you the link again for those of you that joined late. I have a short link, so please feel free to use that short link. In that Git repository, everything is explained, what you need to do. Also, big kudos to Adam Gardner and Katharina Sick. They helped quite a bit, and they did most of the work here. So I'm in the lucky situation to just present what they have built. If you have any feedback, either leave a comment or create an issue on the Git repository, or send an email to devrel@dynatrace.com. This is still work in progress, but we have quite something prepared. Now, in that README, we have a lot of stuff documented because we need an OAuth client, we need some other tokens, and it explains really every step. Now, I have already created all these tokens. So that means I don't go through this exercise anymore. I just do this kind of the fast way. But just to let you know, I have a Dynatrace environment here, as you can see, and just to prove that I'm really have nothing that you will later see because everything will automatically get updated and installed. I have my Kubernetes app, and you see here there's two Kubernetes clusters that I have right now. One is called Captain, one is called Hot Day Platform Engineering. These two have nothing to do with what we do today. This is just stuff that's running. Later on, you will see a third cluster coming up fully automatically. I also have, just to prove, on notebooks, I do have a couple of notebooks, but if I look at those that have been created the last time, this has been last year. So there's nothing new in here. Also on the dashboard side, there's a lot of old stuff in here. The reason why I'm showing you this because as I'm going to launch my tutorial, the tutorial and the platform as it's built up will automatically create notebooks, dashboards, workflows, everything. Okay. So I just want to make sure that you understand this, that this is my cluster. I've created a token, a so-called OAuth client token that allows then my tutorial to communicate with Dynatrace and do a lot of configuration stuff. All right. So now to actually get started. So this is the public repo. What you need to do is you just create a fork. Forking means you need a GitHub account. In my case, my personal GitHub account is Grabner Andy, and I'm just forking this in, which means I get my own kind of copy that is linked to that master repo that I just forked it from in my own account. So that's one thing. The second thing I need to do, because later on we will use this Git repository to create new apps, to let our platform deploy apps, we'll do self-service, so code will be created, pull requests will be done. And one of the things we want to make sure that the demo runs a little smoother, there's a feature in GitHub called GitHub Actions, and we're just going to enable GitHub Actions. That's the prerequisite. And that's also all documented. So everything that I'm doing here, as I said, is fully documented here. How to create the tokens, how to create the fork, everything is documented. Now, the last thing I need to do, and this is, as I said, a nice feature from GitHub, but you may use Gitpod or other tools out there, right? So there's a feature called code spaces. And one of the things is you can click on the three dots and you can say, create a new code space with options. Code spaces basically mean GitHub will launch a virtual machine for me. And in that virtual machine, I can configure what I want. And in my case, it will be a Kubernetes cluster using kind. It will then install Argo. It will then install the Dynatrace operator. It will install a lot of other tools, and it will connect all these tools. Now, in order to do this, if I click on with options, you'll see this here. You have a couple of options because you can actually specify in which region you want to run this. I want to run it in Europe West because that's where I'm located. Machine type, everything will run fine on the small type. I'll just select the one with 4 core because I just want to make sure that with the limited time we have today that everything runs smoothly and I don't need to wait because I have limited resources here. Now, the first time you do this, you need to fill in the Dynatrace environment. That's the environment name. Everything is documented, the tokens that you've created. I've done this once and assigned it to my GitHub account, so I can just click on the checkbox and everything is good. Now I click on create code space, and now the magic happens behind the scenes. GitHub, in my case, will launch this tutorial. That means it will, if you've never done this before, it will launch an image with a virtual environment, and in that image, it's going to then create my Kubernetes cluster. This will take about 5 to 10 minutes while this is running, and I keep this open, I promise, in the back. I'll go back to my slides and remind you, if you want to do this yourself, the link is here. The link is also in the chat. And if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature. All right. So as we have now about 5 to 10 minutes as the demo sets up in the back, I want to quickly recap on part 1, because this is part 2 of the observability guide. In part 1, I covered a lot of the basics of platform engineering and bringing observability to platform engineering. And for this, I want to share again a link with you. This is the part number 1, and I know you can scan it here, but I'm also a fan of giving you the links directly. So this actually, this link gets you, and actually, let me go back to my browser so we actually see what's happening. It's still running. I can open up that link, and that link that I just gave you gets you into our Dynatrace Playground tenant. At least that was the idea. Here we go. With the refresh, everything seems to work. Here we go. Now I'm there. This is the content that I've created for the clinic I did a while ago, and it explains everything on how to get observability into Kubernetes, how to use metadata so that Dynatrace understands better your releases. So this is just some basic foundation. And on the very bottom, I also talked about ownership, release observability, DORA metrics, a lot of different use cases that I've highlighted. So in case you have not seen my observability clinic for platform engineering part 1, this would be a good way to start. Let me just quickly walk over here. See my demo. My GitHub code spaces is still running. This means now I have a virtual machine. What GitHub is doing, it's kind of linking in my GitHub repository that I forked, and now it's running some scripts to actually create the whole environment. So this will take another 5 minutes or so, which means I have more time now to cover what we have learned at Perform 2024. For this, I think I have another link for you that I want to post in the chat. And folks, remember, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature, and I'll try to keep an eye on it. So Perform, and for those of you that haven't been there or that haven't watched the on-demand recording it, this is the link that you can use to get access to the on-demand content. I want to highlight a couple of things that I really liked because I was also personally involved. So I was very lucky to have Marcio Lena on stage where we talked about platform engineering, the challenges that platform engineering is trying to solve, because in our industry, we have a lot of engineering time being wasted because of additional things that developers need to do that don't allow them to actually be productive. So only 40% of engineering time is productive, and 36% of developers, based on the latest State of DevOps report, are actually claiming that they leave an organization because of bad developer experience. Now, what was really nice is we then talked about how can we actually measure developer productivity. How can we, what's the outcome of platform engineering? It's definitely increased developer productivity and happiness. And Marcio then did a really great job in showing how he at Dell was implementing observability as a self-service. They made it as easy as just giving the developers a config file where they say they want to have traces or logs enabled, and then the rest was fully done automatically. And this is really what you want from a platform engineering observability perspective. You want to take away the complexity of collecting and analyzing and automating based on data, and you want to just make it as easy as possible for engineers to turn this on, to follow best practices. He also gave some really nice examples on the business benefits. Because again, these are just some screenshots that I took from the recording that is available, the QR code that you see here. And I'm just resending this because I can see more people are joining now. This here is the link and the QR code that gets you to the on-demand recording of the main stage presentations, and actually from all presentations. But I was really happy with Marcio on stage and hearing what they have achieved. Now, 2 other breakouts that I can highlight is I had one with Michael Gless, that's the top one, where we talked about how Dynatrace is internally implementing our IDP and how developers in Dynatrace start with Jira, then use Backstage, and then through GitHub and Bitbucket end up coding and live coding using a tool called Gitpod. He went through very much detail here. And then the second breakout on platform engineering, that's what I did with Adam, who also put most of the effort in on the demo we're showing later. He and I talked about a reference implementation of an IDP, and the demo that I'm doing today is actually an optimized version of what we showed there. And for your benefit, I want to also post the 2 links here. I know these are all QR codes to the individual session recordings, but I'm going to send these 2 links here as well in the chat. And thanks for already asking questions. I will answer them in a second. I just want to make sure I get through this content, and then look at my demo, and then I will answer the questions. All right, so breakouts. Now, fresh off the press, we have a new platform engineering ebook. I can highly recommend that you are downloading that ebook. I'm sending you again a link now in the chat. So go to that link, give your email, and then you can download the link that it's really, as you can see, the Driving DevOps and Platform Engineering for Digital Transformation. I put a screenshot here on the different chapters. I think this is a really great guide of, first of all, what is DevOps, what is platform engineering, why is one not replacing the other, but why are they complementing each other, and then some best practices. So please check this out. What else do we have? At Perform, we talked a lot about platform engineering use cases. If you remember, or if you're watching some of our content, we talked about a lot of use cases along the software development lifecycle, from development, operate, prevent, and so on. We showed how we use some of these use cases or have implemented them internally. Some of our customers showed how they do things, and we started documenting these use cases. Now, the next link I want to give you here is a link to that doc page where all of these use cases are listed. Some of them have already been documented, but only some of them, because now we want to make sure that we're documenting the use cases that matter to you, that actually have an impact for you. So this is why I know there's a lot of links today, but please, hopefully you can help us here. We need your feedback. We want to make sure that we are investing in the right use cases. So we just created it's like an office form, like a feedback form, right? Formsoffice.com, you can see it. It basically, we want to ask you here with all the major use cases, at least the top 25 or so listed, and we would like to get your feedback on which one of those are of importance for you in the next coming months, so that we can make sure that we are focusing on those use cases and the descriptions of those use cases that you need to implement right now. Because we have a lot of use cases, but we know that not everybody might be interested. So we want to focus on those that have the biggest impact with you. All right. So last but not least, before I go back just to the demo, in case you are new to Dynatrace, could also be some of your names don't look familiar to me, so maybe some of you are new. There is a chance for you, if you're new, to sign up for a Dynatrace trial. You can also access the so-called Dynatrace playground tenant through the DT Discover URL. And I also have a lot of tutorials on GitHub, right? On github.com, Dynatrace Perf Clinics, Dynatrace Getting Started. This is where you really see a lot of the material we put out there. Cool. All right, so now it is time for the demo. So let's go back to my demo environment. Awesome. So now remember what I did? I did a so-called code space. That means I have from my Git repository, and let me just show you that Git repository again. GitHub Grabner Andy. So that's my GitHub account and repositories. The last one this year, the platform engineering demo. This is the one that I forked about 10 minutes ago. And here I created a so-called code space. It's called Humble Disco. They have a really fun way with random names. So mine is called Humble Disco. And now, once you launch that code space, you actually get a Visual Studio Code browser interface. And I have my full access to my code space here. What has happened, a Kubernetes cluster has been installed. So that means if you do a kubectl get pods here, right, you actually see what has been installed. Argo, Backstage, Kubebench, KubeHunter, Dynatrace, and Nginx Ingress, Kind, obviously, Open Feature, Open Telemetry, everything has been installed here. Now, everything is pretty well described, as I said, in that README. But what I want to show you is, if you click on that ports, so this is really like my virtual machine. Only I have access to it right now because of the default settings in terms of privacy. When you do this yourself, you will also be able to come here and you can see that these are the different systems that we have, or the different environments. The 3100, that is actually the one for, I'm opening up this now, for Argo. I'm opening up Argo, and I'm also opening the last one here, the 30.105. This one is a URL that should get me to Backstage. Awesome. And this is all running in my demo environment that I just launched 10 minutes ago, and you can do the same. Now for Argo, I need to log in. And in order to log in, I need the password. It always gets generated, a new one. So there's some description here, actually. If you scroll down after how to set everything up, there's a section on once everything is done, right? This is stuff that I did earlier. Log into Argo. So I can just copy this here. I have a terminal window, and in my terminal window, I can just paste in this comment. I get my temporary password, right click, and I should be able to log in and sign in. Perfect. Awesome. So you now see that our demo environment that every one of you can run just as I did, very simple, takes 5 to 10 minutes. It uses Argo, and Argo is actually, and this is pretty cool about it. If I look at 15 entries here, we're using a platform concept where Argo is used to also deploy the platform. So the platform itself, our IDP, consists of Argo rollouts, is an additional component. The configuration for Argo, Backstage, the Cert Manager, cron jobs, Dynatrace. So we're using Argo to roll out our platform, and the platform is really the set of tools that later give our developers a self-service portal to create new apps, to build new apps, to deploy apps, so that these apps are then getting deployed on our target environments, automatically monitored with Dynatrace, automatically be security checked with all the different tools we've put in there, yeah, automatically configured. But just to show you that part of the demo is also Argo. Argo itself and everything that runs on that cluster is also monitored by default with Dynatrace, right? Because all the tools you have in your IDP should be observed. So the platform, and you can see here, these are all the other tools that have been deployed. Now, one critical tool here is Backstage. Backstage is one option for a so-called, I would call it a developer portal, like a UI to your development platform. Now, there's different ways on how you can provide a user interface. It could just be, CLI-based. It could be just Git-based, or you're providing a UI. This Backstage is a product. It's an open source project from Spotify. There's others out there, like Port is a very common one, Humanitech. There's different companies that have kind of IDPs with a nice UI. Why do we have such an IDP? Why do we have such a UI? Because as development organizations, you want to make sure you know what type of APIs do you have available in your organization. Because if you're building new services, you want to know which other APIs you can use. You also want to just in the home, what other components, what other services are already there, what other applications are there. Also documentation, right? So the idea of this is really to give developers everything that they need so that they can start coding. One important piece is the create feature here. So the create is a templating feature, and I think this is where it's so important. The idea and the concept of platform engineering, that platform engineering teams provide a set of tools and an interface to that platform, and then also they call it golden paths or opinionated ways on how developers can get certain things done in an easier way as they would without that platform. So for instance, creating a new Git repository that is already pre-configured with all of the pipelines, with the security checks, with the deployment, with all of your GitHub actions, with everything. And that's what we have here. So we have two templates, one for a feedback form, I'll show you this later, and one it's called creating a new application. So I can choose here. Now this is a very simplified version, but it's a wizard that allows me to specify what do I want to do. Now in our case, our platform, our template allows me to deploy a particular existing app that was already built. Normally here, you can then start from scratch and build and creating a repository with, let's say, some Java code, some Go code, whatever it is, maybe with a Jenkins pipeline or with GitHub actions that build it. In our case, we just want to focus on the deployment. So I can select from one application that is already there, click on next. Here, very important, the next step, and that's a very common thing to do. Team identifier, who are you? Who is my team? I'm going with the defaults, team one. You will see where this is important later. So I am team one. My team name is team one, but it's a little boring. I call this team one clinic, Andy, and then an email. click on next. I can specify in my case, what type of version do you want to deploy in which environment? Do I want to have DORA metrics enabled, which means it will install then Captain? Do I want to have additional security scans? So these are all options as a developer that I can just check. I click on review. This is everything I put in. I click on create, and that's it. What's happening now behind the scenes in a platform engineering way, right? It took a template that we've specified, and all these templates, remember, they're all publicly in this Git repository that I've just forked. This template was used to now create either a new Git repository if you are following a practice where you're creating new repositories for every app. In my case, we made it easy. It created a pull request on that same repository. See here, Grabner Andy, Platform Engineering Demo. This is the same one that I forked. And here, my template, my wizard, basically created a set of new files with a pull request. That pull request was already approved because we have automated approval turned on, which means if I look now into my repository, I have everything that my platform engineering team did, but I also have here my customer apps. And here is my folder for the simple node service team 1 pre-prod. Here are all the definitions, the ingress, the namespace, the role binding, the rollout. Here's all of my Monaco definition. So my template automatically contains synthetic monitor definitions, right? As a developer, I don't need to do anything, but my platform engineering team has provided the template, and I've been using Backstage to kind of create an instance of this template as a separate folder in that Git repository. As I said, this could be a different Git repository for different teams, for different organizations. But this is just to keep everything simple in one repository. We just we just add an additional folder, right? And you can see here, this is later on going to deploy a synthetic test against that public URL that once the app is deployed, this is like a very, as you can see here, a dynamic URL from GitHub. But everything is here, the team identifiers here. So already, this is where you know why the team information is so important, because we're adding tags to everything that is created. So synthetic tests, SLOs are created, ownership is created. In Dynatrace, we have an ownership feature, right? And that means ownership means you can define teams, responsibilities, and they will then also be associated with everything that is deployed. So that's pretty cool. So now we have our platform engineering team has built this. They give me as a developer a UI when I can say I want to create a new app. And I know it's very simplified because we only have one template, but you can have maybe, apps for like business critical apps, for Java, you can have different templates. The most important thing is, as I created a new version of this or my own app, the templates itself. So this is the template folder. You may have guessed it, app templates, simple node content. These are all the templates. And now let me show you one of these templates, synthetic monitor, right? Here you can see, this is the template with all these placeholders. And as I ran through the wizard, it actually created now let's call it an instance of this, like my own directory. Where is it? My custom apps. And then I have here in Monaco, just what I showed you earlier. This is where I have now this specific version for me. Yeah, really cool. So now what else is happening? We have a new Git repository. We have a new folder for my team. I want to build a new app. Remember Argo. Argo is there. And in my case, it has been configured to keep an eye on new folders in that Git repository. Argo has a concept of so-called app of apps, where you can, and it's an application set controller actually. And now you may have noticed it. It went from green, there's one yellow. And if I scroll down, I can see here a simple node. So Argo is actually doing its job. Argo is a GitOps operator that takes the definition in Git, in my Git repository, as the desired state, as the source of truth, the desired state, and it's now applying that desired state on my target environment, on my demo environment here. So that means it's deploying it's deploying the ingress, it's deploying the roles, the role binding. It's deploying a service definition. It's also running a workflow here. We're using Argo workflow to then trigger Monaco, because I want to also apply Monaco to this. Now, one more thing I want to quickly do because I forgot this and I want to show you something really cool. Backstage, all of these things are actually private by default. I make this now public because one of the things that I want to highlight here is I'll show you what actually happens in Dynatrace, but Dynatrace is monitoring all of this. And as Dynatrace is observing new deployments made from Backstage, we have set up a workflow in Dynatrace that is automatically sending back notifications to Backstage, letting the developer in Backstage know that, hey, there's a new deployment that Dynatrace has observed. There's a new, maybe there was a Guardian that was run to validate. So this is stuff we can also do. And in order for my Dynatrace environment to call back into my demo here, because remember, by default, all the demos you run using code spaces are only private, so only I can access it, who created it, and make it public so that my Dynatrace SaaS environment can post over. So that's cool. All right. Let's see. I want to show you the deployment is finished. That's cool. I want to show you a couple of things here, what actually has happened in Backstage. Let me just make sure that, sometimes it takes a little, but let me just refresh here until I see all this. Sometimes the demo gods are, let me just do this, right? There you go. I guess I probably need to allow now that I am going there. No, maybe making it public. It was not, well, it was Argo, Backstage. Somebody just killed maybe my environment. I hope not. Let me try this again. Argo is still here. I also hope that Backstage is still here. Backstage is still running. But as I said, we're running here on some, here we go. Backstage is here again. I'm running on a very thin layer of infrastructure, but everything works. So now in my Backstage, I see there's a new application. It's called Simple Node Service Team 1. I can click on it. Again, this is still my user interface for my developers. And here we go. What I should see, but sometimes the demo gods don't work as expected, but I'm just refreshing. Maybe it works again. We have a Backstage Dynatrace integration, as I mentioned earlier, and it actually should pull in information from Dynatrace. It should show me, it should give me a link on the Kubernetes deployment observation in Dynatrace. It should give me a direct kind of the first 10 log lines we had. And, we just try this again, and maybe we'll, sometimes the demo gods are just demo gods, and sometimes they are demons and not gods. But we'll try this once more. And obviously now, as this environment, maybe I'll just do an incognito browser. This is the last thing I try here, and otherwise I'll try it later. Here we go, report, continue. There we go. Here we go. Now it's good. Perfect. So as you can see here, this is my kind of development view, and I can scroll down. So now we have the Dynatrace integration to Backstage, which will be released publicly soon, but you can obviously already use it because I'm using it here as well. It tells me, hey, your app is deployed. That's really cool. Here's your link to the GitHub. If you want to see your app, this is the link to actually browse it, right? What's the app actually look like? It's not that exciting. It's a very simple app here. But I also get the link here to Dynatrace, and that's really cool. Now I'm in incognito modus, so I'm just taking and copying that link and going over to my regular browser because here I'm logged in. So this is the link now that gets me into the Dynatrace Kubernetes experience. With one click, I directly get to my view. I see my utilization. I see my info of my workload. I see ownership. Remember ownership. This is here. I know it's team number 1. This is all the information I gave in. Team number 1, clinic, Andy, the contact details. All of this has been automatically associated with it because my templates that I've used and defined are automatically using some of the labels, right? There's a DT owner label that you can specify on your Kubernetes deployment definitions. And then this ID here will then link it with the rest of the team information. What else do we have here? We have events, right? So this is so cool because now a developer can stay in the in the UI that they use, whether it's Backstage or other products that they use, and with everything being set up to be automatically be monitored, developers can easily then just get a link, get presented a link and say, show me the information that I need because now I know a new deployment is out there, so give me the data. So events, I can click on logs, right? So the logs are directly accessible here. So really super easy. Now, I want to go once more back to Backstage. I go back to Backstage, not this one because I have to go here, right? If I scroll down further, there is another section here, Dynatrace logs. So then the Backstage Dynatrace integration can actually pull in data from any DQL query. And one thing that I've configured is 2 DQL queries. One would be on the right side where we don't have anything yet. If you would have a site reliability guardian, and that guardian is connected with that particular deployment and it runs as part of a deployment, then it would show up here which guardian was executed, which SLOs are evaluated, and what the result was. But here on the left side, I just said, hey, show me the latest logs. So as a developer, I'm just here and I see all of my logs. And if I want to see more logs, either click on the link here to bring me to the workload, or I click on show logs here, and then it brings me, right? If I click on copy link, remember the reason why I'm doing this because I open up this browser in incognito mode, and I don't want to log in now again. Here we go, just a new notebook, and then I get the query of the last, I don't know, 2 hours, and then I get my logs if there would be any refresh logs here. Cool. All right. So what else do we have? I want to show you some of the other things that have been created. So now this is platform engineering, the observability guide to platform engineering. First of all, we observe the deployment of the app, right? We give the developers what they need. But there's also the platform engineering view of it. As a platform engineering team, the team is responsible for things like Argo, for Backstage, for things like that. They want to get an overview of what is actually happening. I want to show you a couple of things that also happened here. So I have dashboards. The dashboards, if I click on view all the dashboards, you can see here. Remember earlier in the beginning, I showed you that screen and these were not here because they were just created. So as part of creating my platform initially, we also used Monaco to already upload a couple of dashboards that might be interesting. So for instance, Backstage error analysis. That's an interesting one, right? Because I want to know if I'm using a tool like Backstage and Backstage is emitting logs. So here, what we're actually doing, we are analyzing logs. It's a pre-built dashboard that can analyze the logs that Backstage creates. And Backstage might be misconfigured. So I can actually say what type of error. So it seems like I have 26 different configurations that have invalid configuration. You can see here, it seems some of the things that Backstage is analyzing is improperly configured. Why is this important? Because you want to not only observe the apps that are getting deployed, but also all of the tools that are part of your platform. Backstage is one example. Argo is another one, right? We're using Argo. So here I have an automated dashboard that shows me the key metrics that Argo is emitting through Prometheus. So the default setup of our platform is that when we deploy Argo, that Argo is automatically being scraped by Dynatrace from all the Prometheus metrics. Things like what's the work queue depth, how many requests are being made to my Git system, how many syncs, how many prepares, how many starts to happen. So this is an overview to see how actively used is a core component of a platform like Argo. What else do we have here? There is I think the platform observability cockpit. That's also a nice one, just like a different view on things, on how many apps have actually been deployed. Now there's one section here that's called new feature ideas. This is one thing I quickly want to show you. And then I want to make also sure I cover everything else and then the questions. Now, if I go back to my Backstage, if you remember, in Backstage, as a developer, I can create a new application based on what the application team has given me, right? And in my case, this is a really simple example. If you consider your platform that you build is like a product and your users are your developers and your developers don't like your product because it doesn't do what they want, doesn't solve a problem, and then you may want to give them a feedback option. So here we are using the same concept of these templates to collect feedback. So I can say, hey, I want, the platform needs to, right? My name is Andy, and I want to say, I need templates to create more complex apps and not just a simple node app, right? Something like that. And then I can click on review and create. Now, what is this? What this is doing, what we've done behind the scenes is, if this once this dashboard gets refreshed, let's refresh it now. It actually sends over a business event to Dynatrace. Just do this again. Come on. Here we go, right? So we are collecting feedback from our users. And the way we do it, we're actually sending a business event to Dynatrace. Backstage has a capability to make REST calls. So we're just making a REST call to ingest business events. And now I have this information here, right? Obviously, we could create a Jira ticket or whatever it is, but we are also showing you other ways of how we can now use Grail and ingesting logs, metrics, traces, or business events to really implement these additional use cases. Because from a platform engineering side, I want to know if my platform actually makes sense, yes or no. A couple of other quick things I want to highlight. Synthetic. If you click on synthetic, what you should see is, by default, we have two synthetic checks here, one for Argo and one for Backstage. These are the two core tools we have. That means, as part of the initial setup of the platform, two synthetic tests were created, owned by the platform team, that make sure that Argo is actually available. And I get an early warning in case Argo is not there or Backstage is not there. For every app that gets deployed, remember, here's a health check, simple node team. For every app that gets deployed by our developers, we also, in that template, follow best practices and automatically get a synthetic test because we want to make sure that new deployments are also available. But as a developer, I didn't have to think about this. It's just there, all right? Other things, because I mentioned this earlier, service level objectives. There has been a service level objective created for my team number one. Team number two is something I deployed earlier, but team number one is something, right? And I deployed it multiple times earlier today. Let me just go to the global time frame, right? If I now say the last 2 hours, I did a little test just before, and now you can see that I automatically have an availability SLO. And as a developer, I didn't have to deal with it because everything was part of the template. Last thing, we also have workflows. So one of the workflows that was created was the so-called lifecycle events workflow. The lifecycle events workflow is something we built when we built actually this reference demo for Perform. What this does, every time Argo is letting Dynatrace know that there is a sync happening. So the way Argo works, Argo detects there is some configuration in Git that is new, or it's out of sync with the target state. Like earlier, we created a new app, a new folder, so it's called out of sync. So what it actually does, it sends a so-called pre-sync event. Then it's doing the actual sync. And if the sync succeeds, as a post-sync or a fail sync event. So these events are sent to Dynatrace as business events. And what we've built here, we've built a workflow that actually, when these events come in, there's one critical piece here. This code here is actually validating, hey, Argo tells us it is syncing something, it's deploying something. This code here actually makes sure that Dynatrace is actually observing it, that Dynatrace is actually seeing it, because it could happen that you're deploying into a cluster that is not observed, where maybe you had some configuration issues. So what this workflow really does, as these events are coming in, first of all, it sends a notification back to Backstage saying, I'm aware of this. Then it's validating if the deployment is here. If it cannot find any monitored entities, it is sending an error. If it finds it, it sends a success event. And this runs every time. Now, if you click on executions, you can see here there were 3 executions, 13, 14, and 15 minutes ago. And if I hopefully was on time, then and I click on notifications, here we go. You can see here, this is kind of like, this is why I said earlier, I had to open up the URL to Backstage from private to public so that my Dynatrace workflow can actually send data in. In our demo here, we did not want to include yet another chat solution like Slack or MS Teams. We wanted to make it easy. So we added a little notification plugin to Slack. And this notification plugin is actually used from the workflow to send this information, right? Detected, sync start, detected, sync finished. And then it says, hey, here, the observability is ready for your service. So I also get yet, as a developer in my chat solution, a link once Dynatrace is fully aware of it. And the way we decided to do this, right, going over here, and there's different ways of doing it, but I just said, okay, let's just create a link to, let's say, the process group with all the details. Right? So all of this is here. Last thing, releases. For those of you that have known me and listened to some of my content, I'm a really big fan of all the release metadata, the version information, the stage information, the deployment events. All of this is here. And all of this is automatically here. Why? Because following best practices, following observability guidance for platform engineering, I go back to my repository, right? I think this is an important takeaway. Whether you're using Argo or Backstage or Flux or any other tools, look at into the app templates. What we've built here is templates where, for instance, in the rollout definition, we're using Argo rollouts here. We made sure that we have the right labels. DT owner makes the association with the team. Dynatrace release stage tells Dynatrace which stage you're in. The Kubernetes name and the part of and the version also tells Dynatrace about which version this is, to which app it belongs to. We're also automatically passing all this information into the container using those DT release version product stage environment variables, because then the one agent that is capturing distributed traces can also enrich these distributed traces with version information. So we're following a lot of best practices here. And by making all of this available to you, hopefully you can get some idea and some inspiration of what's possible. There's also a folder called Dynatrace Assets, the dashboards that I've showed you, the notebooks and the workflow, they're all here, and they just get uploaded in the beginning when the installation script runs. All right. So let me, folks, if you have questions, please, now is the time to look at the question, to discuss the questions. I'll just skip over the slides here because these slides, they will be shared on Dynatrace University. I just created screenshots of everything that I had to do to set up the environment, forking the environment, launching the code space, ready to play. How does Argo look like? How does Backstage look like? How can we create a new app? So these are all just screenshots of basically the demo that I did in case the demo wouldn't have worked. But fortunately, the demo worked almost flawlessly, not perfectly, but almost flawlessly. So everything is here. I showed you these things. I showed you the workflow. There's also another notebook in there with some additional instructions on how to create a site reliability garden and how to hook it up with those events. I want to wrap it up and then handle all the questions. One of the things you want to make sure is if you're creating that the tutorial like I did, and you're using code spaces, actually GitHub is really good. If they detect 15 minutes of inactivity, they will basically shut down that code space. That means they're not charging you for it, and you can then just bring it up again. That's all good. At some point, you may want to delete it because even if it's shut down, there's some, I think, like storage that eats into your monthly free premium model. So eventually you may want to delete it. From a Dynatrace side, if you do this on your Dynatrace tenant, as you saw it, synthetic tests are created, SLOs are created, ownership information is created, tokens. These are things you may want to also, kind of delete at some point just to clean up, do some housekeeping. And these are the links that I mentioned earlier. I'm sending them in again in the chat, and then I'm really looking at the questions because I can see questions are coming in. So the first link is that's the tutorial. The second link is the doc. So remember, we do have a doc page for PE use cases. So platform engineering use cases documentation. We also have an ebook. The ebook. Where's the ebook? The ebook link is here. Ebook. And this is stuff that you find in the chat in Zoom. And then the last thing is we want to make sure we focus on describing the right use cases that are right for you. So there's a feedback form on priorities. This would be great if you could fill out that form as well, because this will help us to focus content creation on the right topics. All right. First question, the link for the recording session. Yeah, every session that we're doing will end up on the Dynatrace YouTube channel, first of all. And here's the short link, the one agent tutorials. So this is YouTube. The recordings will also be available on Dynatrace University. If you log into university, there's a section called Dynatrace Webinars. And as you have registered for this webinar, you also get a follow-up email with the recording. The first question then, the other one, is there any way of adding an observability to Azure DevOps service without having to modify all pipelines, meaning a pull method instead of... So currently we have a partner, they're called Omnilogy, and they are currently building a model where we are pulling data from Azure DevOps and also other pipelines through the public APIs, and then feeding it into Dynatrace. And they also have a nice Dynatrace app that they built where they show you pipeline overview, how many pipelines per project, how often do they run, how many they fail. They give you some of the DORA metrics, and they're using, depending on the tool, and I know for Azure DevOps, there's a pull option because Azure DevOps provides an API. That's also possible. You can do the same thing for GitHub, sorry, because GitHub also has an API, so you can either, you can just create a workflow and then pull the API. But I know that the same partner, Omnilogy, that are building this stuff for Azure DevOps currently, they're already, implementing this with one of our customers. They also have GitHub and others on the list. Sean, you asked this question. If you want, please do me a favor, send me an email, and then I can also connect you with them. My email is my first name, so andreas.grabner at dynatrace.com. That should be very easy, right? I'm also sending it here. So feel free, actually do me a favor, send it DevRel at dynatrace.com. That's better because that goes to the whole team. This is our team email. Please send an email and say, hey, you would like to get connected. If you're interested into the Azure DevOps pipeline observability, then I will make this happen. Awesome. Perfect. Hopefully this answers those questions. Folks, any other questions? And you can see here now I was inactive for a while and the code space was stopped. That means GitHub is really good. They're stopping after a certain amount of inactivity. This can be good and bad, right? If you want to, I think that you can change that timeout somewhere. I think by default it's 15 minutes. If you don't interact with that UI, with that Visual Studio UI for 15 minutes, it considers to be inactive. Good. All right. I'll give you 1 more minute for more questions, if there are more questions. Otherwise, as you can probably see, it's getting dark here, or it's gone dark here. Probably the end of my day. So I will then probably stop the sharing, and I say thank you so much for being here with me today. And yeah, if there's any questions coming up at a later time, you know how to get a hold of us. But thank you so much. Cheers. Bye-bye.